Sorry about that. We are good. We go through all these extra steps of authentication.
There's one in the waiting room.
So apologize for that. Derek, we are ready to begin the meeting.
Okay, do we have a quorum? Krista, we good?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the UIA Board Meeting for April 8th. And has anybody had a chance to review the minutes and like to make a motion for the February 12th meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as recommended, as recorded.
A motion by Brand, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Brenda. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. We'll turn the time over to Jason for the tentative budget.
Thank you, Derek. Let me hurry and share my screen. Krista, you're gonna need to let me do that.
Just a second. Yeah. Okay, you should be good.
Okay, or Roger, I guess. Here we go. Let's see here. Okay, can everybody see my screen now? Somebody say yes.
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 Okay, thank you very much. I'm pleased to present the 2025 executive budget that has been prepared, and I'll just get right into it. First off, looking at Utopia operating revenues, we have projected for an increase of $8.5 million. This has been an interesting year to project revenues for me going through. I will, to start out, point you to the other line on the bottom, which has increased significantly. This other line of $2.1 million may be a bit aggressive. This is partly to cover a deficit fund balance that we have in UIA. This amount may be aggressive, but either way, it's mainly there for fund balance purposes. But if you look at the remaining $6.3 million, whatever it is, that are in the budget, 6.4, we show in residential transport. Well, my assumptions to start off for this are we're projecting to have an average net new customer connections of 350 per month for the next fiscal year. And we're also projecting a continuation of business sales growth, including UBTN. We're projecting less business sales than we had in the prior year, and that's primarily due to less funding be available for businesses outside of Utopian funding and partner cities. And that's primarily due to the situation of our bond revenues, how much bond revenues we have remaining. The residential.
Jason, your sound is kind of going back and forth. I don't know if there's anything you can do. Sometimes I hear you good, and sometimes your words get a little jumbled.
You know what? Let me try
having the same experience.
Let me try to put on my earphones here. Sorry about that. I'll probably stop sharing my screen for just a second. Please bear with me. I'm sorry. I'm obviously out of town. Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry, I'm just gonna have to try talking closer. I'm not having any luck connecting.
Yeah, that's
So,
probably fine.
okay,
I got most of the words, but some of them would just kind of get crunched up a little bit.
I apologize for that. I'm trying to connect my earphones and it's just not moving well for me. So I will move my paper and make sure that I have my mouth very, very closer to the microphone for you. But I'll share my screen. Okay. And once again, going through revenue, I'll just kind of start over with residential transport, talking about what we have there. We're showing an average net new customer connections of about 350 per month is what's been projected for next year. This is a little bit less than we saw last year, but last year we did have 4 cities coming on brand new. We got a big bump from them starting. Next year we only project to have 1 city coming on new, but it's still really, really good growth. The residential transport revenue increase there of $3.2 million. That's been an interesting number going through this year. This includes a rate increase of $4 per month on most of our products. If you look at that, that would be about, if you take our total fees of the lease revenue and monthly charge from service providers, that would be about a 7.3% increase is what we would be looking at there. We're not sure if we're going to have to do that increase or not. We would, of course, rather not do it. But right now, there are 2 things driving the need. One is that we are seeing inflationary pressures just for the cost of keeping up the network in existing cities and building out to new areas and doing all those connections. The second is that in order to go for another bond this year, they're looking very closely at one factor, and they look at a ratio that is our operating revenue versus our debt less our cash. And just where we are right now, a rate increase would make that much more likely to be approved. I said we're not sure if we're going to have to do it or not, and that's primarily because we have received some indications that there's another bond rating agency who has rated a transaction similar to what we do. And if we can get a rating from a different bond agency than the current bond agency we use right now for ratings, we could get bond insurance on our bonds. And if we had bond insurance, we could release the debt service reserve funds that we have, which would then be available when we would need to go to bond. And if we didn't need to go to bond, there's a chance that we wouldn't need to do the rate increase. Any questions there so far?
Jason, did you say what percentage amount you think the rate might go up?
We are projecting somewhere between $3 and $4 right now. And then that would be a monthly increase, and that's about 7.3%. If you look at the total bill, that's how we're looking at it. But once again, this is not certain, but it is possible.
When was the last time that the rates were increased?
But it's probably been 10, 11 years or so at least. And usually we kind of change all of the products because we have newer speeds and technologies. And so there's a shifting of higher tiers to lower tiers at the same time, adjusting things so that our revenue actually increases over time, even though the tiers go down and you get better speed for the price. In this case, we're not anticipating a shifting of speeds down as the rates change. However, we have done that. Our 10 gig pricing is going down. We don't have very many customers on there, so it's not a big financial impact. But this one would be to just apply up to $4 to our 250 meg and 1 gig product on the wholesale side. Granted, the service providers do mark that up, so we have different tiers already that they are different amounts they charge on top of what we charge them on a wholesale basis. they may absorb it, they may pass it through, and they could even add to that. That's kind of for them to decide what to do. But our wholesale price would go up 4%. If that was passed through to the end user, then that's the, what did you say, 7%, 7 something percent that
Yeah.
represents, Jason?
That is, yeah, that's if it's of our cost, what we charge to the end user and the service provider together. Yes.
But it's important to note that represents a straight pass through of that increase, and it should be less, the same, or more than that, depending on what the retail providers do.
Thank you. This is Carolyn. The $4 increase, you said up to 4, so it would be less for those that are getting a smaller package, or what about the commercial carriers with the commercial accounts?
So it's not applied to the commercial accounts. Those adjust a lot more often. So we were saying how we haven't adjusted our rates for at least 10 years on the residential. We adjust the business rates almost annually. And so this is not anticipated to be applied to the commercial rates. Those have already been adjusted. And then, this would just affect the 250 meg and gigabit product tiers. We're introducing a new 2.5 gig that we haven't had before. So we don't have any assumptions that even affects this, but if we get a lot of customers and take rate on that, that would create additional revenue. Because we do charge more for 2.5 gig. But it's not going to be significant in this budget year. I mean, we did really well with that and added several thousand customers. It's still not a lot compared to the depending on how you count them, we have types of customers through our partnerships and all that, but we have, we count 63,000 customers. But as far as UIA is considered, it's fewer than that because it's just the portion that have been funded through the UIA projects.
All right, understood.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where plan A, I want to go back to the point Jason made. Plan A, if things go the way we hope, we won't need to do the rate increase. That would be where we are able to free up the reserve funds from previous bonds by getting bond insurance, and we believe we have a path forward on that. We felt like it would be the most responsible way to present this conservatively, to say if that doesn't come through, we don't want to come back and say, hey, this is a problem and we're going to have to come up with revenues to be able to support a bond to continue to fund installations and incremental growth for our member cities. So we're actually budgeting that, plan B, because it's still fairly likely that could happen where we still need to raise rates. But we're still hopeful that we may not have to. And so obviously we revise our budget. There's a lot of reasons we'd revise our budget. One would be if we were able to free up those funds. If we have additional city partnerships come in, we'd revise the budget to contemplate that. Again, this is the conservative budget, assuming that we wouldn't have any of those events happen. But we want to prepare everyone for the case where if we were not able to free up the funds from the reserve accounts and we still need to get a bond to fund installations and growth, we don't have enough cash availability to just cash fund all of that. We do need to debt finance it. It's a good thing to finance because they create new revenues, but the ratio of revenue and debt, and what they call their FADS ratio, which is analysis they do against our financials for a future bond. We've got to have a revenue that's a little higher than what we would have without a rate increase. So we have to put that rate increase in place to make it happen. So that's how we're budgeted this. We believe we're still in great shape. We've seen all of the competitors raising rates over time, less than we have. So if you were looking at, our minimum entry point right now is a $60 service all-in retail price. And if that went up to $64, we're still very, very competitive and still haven't really even kept up with inflation. So we're not afraid of, that being too high or too negative of an impact in the market. But at the same time, we do like to keep our prices low when we can. So it's kind of a delicate balance of doing what's right for our community and our residents, but also making sure we have the financial tools we need to pay our bills and also finance the future installations and growth.
That was my follow-up question, was if there was a market analysis on what the competitors have done. And I think it's interesting that most of us have experienced little bumps here and there. I don't know if and if you're saying the bond providers are, it strengthens getting those bonds issued. I don't know how the board would feel about, it's interesting that you haven't had any increase in 10 years, which is great. It puts us in a very competitive position, but I don't know, have you looked at other possible bumps other than $4 that would still attract the position that the bond providers look to, but maybe not be quite as large?
I mean, they would love to see us raise it $10, and there could be an argument that we could and still be competitive. But we're not trying to make this as profitable as we can. We're trying to balance paying debts, making sure we're doing the dividend or repayment back to cities, while also trying to capture more of the market. Any customer or resident in our city that's not using our service, I feel like we're failing them to some extent, and so we want to make it attractive to them, keep the prices low. So it's kind of those things we're trying to delicately balance. Could we do less than 4? Maybe. We've done an assessment with a lot of different scenarios of trying to hit the ratios. It's like if we had a stronger sales month than we forecasted, then we wouldn't need quite the $4. We could come in a little bit lower. And I think the decision as to what that amount needs to be isn't being made yet, right? That's that exact dollar amount would be a few months from now. But what we're budgeting for is assuming it's $4 and assuming pretty conservative revenue growth. And if a couple of months from now, we will know whether we can free up the cash from those reserve accounts and whether we even need to worry about this. And if that's a no, then we'll at that point be able to decide what the amount needs to be. Up to $4 is what we're thinking, and we'd have, obviously in a few months we would know, okay, this is it, we're coming in, going to be 3 or it's 3.5 or whatever. We'll have a better, be closer to where we need to get that rating from the bond agency to know what revenues need to look like to hit their FADS ratio is what they use.
They have given us a pretty good indication of where we need to be, though. The $4 will get us.
I don't think they care about what the dollar increase is. They care about what the revenue amount is, right? So we're trying to hit a revenue amount from a rate increase, but we can work that math backwards and come up with that, whether it's 3 or 3.5. But until we're there 2 or 3 months from now, we don't know what our revenues are exactly, because it's dependent on how many customers we bring on and what our revenues look like in a few months.
Roger, I appreciate the sensitivity with which you and your team are trying to approach this with. I really do appreciate that. I'm grateful for that. Part of what I'm worried about is just any residual public perception backlash. So I'm just wondering, of course, this is a charge to our ISPs. My hope would be that the ISPs wouldn't then go to all of the customers and say, hey, we're just passing along this cost increase. This is all Utopia's fault. If you have a problem with it, go reach out to your elected officials or your city leadership or whatever. Can you give us any sense or hopefully comfort that isn't how the ISPs will respond to the cost increase, fee increase?
So, I mean, that's a great point. We think about the same things. We're about to get thrown under the bus here if we were to increase our thing. Well, I think we have a really good marketing relationship with the service providers. Sometimes they'll raise their rates or make changes. Sometimes we do. I think we all agree that the collective marketing between both of us is in our best interest, rather than throw each other under the buses. And that's applies to like outages and problems and other things like that. So we've thought through that, and I think in the discussions we've had with providers, we could come up with that messaging and would agree to it of like, this isn't Utopia is harming us. It's, this is just inflationary adjustment, or this is just, the small increase. It's long overdue, is we haven't raised rates.
Hey, Roger, do you want me to speak to this? And Bryn, we're going to really be working closely if we have to go down this route with the service providers to make sure that we're both on the same message, because we really know that's important. Because as you know, Bryn, back in the day, it used to be service providers, Utopia kind of clashing, and we really want to come out with the united front of why we're doing this and be very transparent to avoid those situations, because I am very aware of what you are referring to, and we want to avoid them at all costs or minimize the impacts of them.
Yeah,
And we've had
perhaps
other
an emphasis that it's
like,
been 10 years, and so on
Yeah.
average, this is a 0.7% increase. So anything to that effect where we can, I love what I'm hearing in terms of being on the same page with them, and that we've got, a good track record in that regard. So I'm hoping that this doesn't hurt that.
Absolutely.
there's been other messages that aren't necessarily good that have gotten out there and not harmed us. I mean, one of the ones we're working through now is getting rid of some of the legacy products. I mean, we haven't offered 100 meg service in many years, but there were some people kind of holding on to that. It was at a lower price point, and we've got to upgrade that, get people onto their current standard products are. So there's that messaging of, hey, we don't offer that anymore. We need to get you upgraded to the current services, but it does impact them. It costs a little bit more. That's better value and all that, but not everybody wants that. And so there's, we work through those types of messages with, our providers, because we don't necessarily communicate everything. But fortunately, it's that relationship with the providers isn't like, here's Utopia harming you or causing trouble or raising your rates. It's, this is just a technology update, and the increases and changes that we've done over time have been great. Actually, it made us more competitive as we get more take rate. But they also have increased our revenues over time. I mean, what we get per customer today is much better than it was 10, 15 years ago. And even with those rate increases, you might worry about that price sensitivity. As people are signing up, most of the people signing up for service are picking not the lowest price. They're picking our gigabit service over the 250 meg service, even though it costs more. So I don't think it's, people aren't picking us necessarily because we're the cheapest, or they're looking for the cheapest option. Because when they do sign up for us, they're not even picking our cheapest option. They're picking our, would consider our middle tier, which is that gigabit service.
Yeah, and if I could add one thing to that, one thing we are able to tell our service providers is part of the reason we're having to do this is to continue to fund our growth levels, which will benefit. Anyway.
If we stopped adding customers, we wouldn't need this money, right? So it's in our benefit and their benefit. It does cost a lot of money to continue to add customers. We just had our best year ever adding customers. It does cost a lot of money. So we do need to go out and it's a good use of money to issue debt and pay for installations. But we run into all these issues with the rating and the timing, and so it's we just have to make sure everything's where it needs to be to get the right rating and be able to keep ahead of that demand. It's a good problem to have.
I love the idea of essentially joint marketing that suggests that we're reinvesting into our service to provide a higher quality of service. I think that'd be great. I think that'd resonate well.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then on that, I'll continue on. And basically that's revenues. We are projecting, if you really look at our main products, about 6.4 million of revenue growth. About 1.8 million of that would be the increase, is what we would be looking at there. So we are seeing good growth. And customer demand and everything like that still really strong. We're gonna have a very good customer year right now is what we're predicting. Moving on to operating expenses. Now, technically, I'm not sure all of these are operating expenses, but I'm kind of looking at them from a cash flow basis, and we show operating expenses increasing by $7.4 million. The two that technically, I'm not sure if they're really considered operating expenses by a lot of accounting rules. They're not considered operating expenses. I'm showing here are the debt service net of capitalized interest. These are what we project to be our cash payments for debt over time. And if you'll look over the last few years, when we issue a bond, we have 3 years of capitalized interest. And then after that, we start to make the payments. So if you look over the last few years, last year from fiscal year 2023 to 2024, we increased by $4 million. 2024 to 2025, we're increasing by about $4 million per year. In 2025 to 2026, we're increasing by about $4 million per year. So that's the majority of the increase, and that's part of the reason we need our strong sales growth, is not to lose any ground there. If you look at last year's net operating expenses versus operating revenue, this does include all of these numbers we're looking at here. We had about $10.7 million. I hold back. That doesn't include the distribution to Utopia. So before the distribution to Utopia that we're making for payments to be made to cities, we had about $10.7 million. But that includes everything we paid on the bonds. The other thing that we're looking at is the distribution to Utopia did go up this year, and that makes sure that we can do the repayment of the amounts that are owed to the cities on their bond payments and what they've made in the past. Other than that, you'll see that our marketing administration costs have went down a little bit. This is partly because there are more things happening at Utopia for projects they have going on, where some marketing has shifted from being a UIA marketing expense to being a Utopia marketing expense. And then if you look at the fees paid to Utopia, the next three lines there, management fees to Utopia, service contract fees to Utopia, and capitalized labor to Utopia, they're going up by just under $1 million. If you look, just about. And there are $2.3 million of capital projects that are non-expansion related. So those are for system improvements that we're looking at doing, which is part of the messaging we talked about for that number. Also, now that I think about it, is not in the 10 million, in the 10.7 million. I don't think. I'll go back and look, but that's our operating expenses. Any questions on expenses? If not, I'll move on to network expansion. This is our capital projects budget. And I should have put some column headings on this. I'm really sorry about that now that I look at this. But the last two columns, if we look at a column, if you guys can see, let me go back. If you look at where my cursor is right now, there's a number for 20.8 million of debt proceeds. That would be our fiscal year 2024 budget. If you look at the 10.55 million, that's how much we're projecting to have of bond proceeds available from debt issuance for fiscal year 2025. So that's going to be less money available. And that's going to be affecting business revenue when we are showing a bit less business revenue growth next year than the previous year. In addition, if you go down to expense and capital projects, those same two columns, I've sent out a list of capital projects in the budget that was sent to you. That most of those capital projects that we're seeing are going to be inside existing cities. And the West Haven project, it's gone down from 15 million in the prior year to 2 million in the current year. That's primarily because it is finishing. This is an FYI because now this is happening through Utopia, but the distribution to cities that will be happening, I have the fiscal year 2024 versus fiscal year 2025 distribution. They are increasing by a net of $313,500. That is pretty much within $1. The amount that the debt payments that are being paid by the cities has increased. So it's increased. The debt payment coming from the cities is increasing by $313,500, and that's the amount of the increased distribution to cities. Any questions on the budget?
Roger, I got a quick question, or Jason. On the rate increase, obviously, today we just be adopting the tentative budget. We have final budget adoption coming later. Obviously, the rate increase discussion potentially is a what if or maybe at some point in time in the future. I'm not 100% sure on rate increases with UIA or Utopia. Does it require a specific resolution that approves that rate increase, or is it adopted with the budget?
We actually don't formalize rate increases from the board. That's something that we've handled as basically an administrative decision which is a little different than some other utilities, but it fits a little differently too, because it's in a competitive space. And so we have always had rate changes happen as an administrative decision rather than a board decision. However, those rate increases impact our budget. So we like to have openness and discussion around those. But we're not voting to approve any specific rate increase. We're just voting to approve a budget that assumes a rate increase. And then, obviously, as we go further in the future here, we'll have a better idea what that may or may not have to be. But we would never have at least the way we've operated Utopia, we haven't ever had resolutions or any formal action for rate increases.
All right, thank you. Yeah, obviously we're going to be having a lot more discussion about that as bonding in the future comes up, and you will keep us up to date, I'm sure. Is there any other questions for Jason for the tentative budget or Roger?
Derek, I have a couple questions. The first is we issue a lot of bonds, and I think we have a lot of new people here on here, Jason and Roger. Maybe it would be great, and also for me, just to really get a good sense of what kind of bonds we have out there and what projects they're supporting. We issue a lot of bonds, so I'd like to maybe have a separate conversation one day about that. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe it's a separate conversation with just me, but I would like to have a better handle on our bonds.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that same conversation. I think it's a good thing to understand.
Yeah, so even it's just have a conversation. What bonds are related to what projects? What bonds are we issuing for potentially operations? Anyway, I'd like to have that conversation separately, if that's possible. And then to Jason, we've had this conversation in the past, but the increase to the rebate or to the Utopia cities, what is the methodology used to understand what that increase is? So Centerville is at 3.4%. I saw Layton and West Valley 17.1 or 22. So I'm just trying to understand the methodology to understanding. Is that the bond for that specific city that's what their increase is going to be over next year?
It is, yes. That was sent in the bond document, what percentage each city has.
So poor Layton and Orem for going up so high every year, and be grateful for my 3.4%. Is that what I should be?
Yeah, if you look at what it's going up percentage wise, the payment for each city, it should be exactly the same percentage. So yeah.
Groovy. That's what I needed. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's all I have there.
And if Brad, I'll get a hold of you and Dan also. If anybody else wants to know a rundown of all of our bonds, of course there is a rundown on our financial statements, but I would be happy to do that maybe next week, but yeah, soon.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Is there any other questions on the budget? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the tentative budget proposed in resolution 24-01.
I'll second that. This is Zach from Layton City.
Thank you, Dan and Zach. Is there any further discussion for Christy? This is a roll call. I'll let you do it for me.
Okay. Zach Clarkson,
Yes.
Nate Rockwood,
Yes.
Brenda Moore,
Yes.
Dan Johnson,
Yes.
Bren Bybee,
Yes.
Brent Hansen,
Yes.
Mayor Lundberg,
Yes.
Jason Sant,
Yes.
and Derek Euler.
Yes. Thank you, Krista. Appreciate that. Thanks everybody for the discussion. That was great. Thanks to the staff for their work getting the budget together. Looks like next we've got to schedule the public hearing for the budget. Jason. Looks like Jason disappeared. Maybe Roger, you can take that one.
No, I'm still here. Sorry. I was
Okay.
busy with my headphones. Sorry about that. Yeah, we just need to set a public hearing for the tentative budget, and it will be the same day that we'll be proposing to approve the final budget, and that's our next board meeting.
So that looks like
Can I-
it's for June 10th, correct?
Yes,
And what time is it at, Jason? Sorry, I don't have that.
it'll be 8:30.
8:30. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be our Monday board meeting, 8:30.
And
I believe
Jason,
it's
is
been
it-
in the resolution you approved. Was it in there, Chris? I'm trying to remember. I did update it.
Jason, this is to do amendments to the fiscal year 24 budget as well, correct? The
Oh,
public
yes.
hearing?
Yeah, we will want a public hearing. There could be some amendments to the fiscal year 2024 budget also. I'm looking through some final numbers there. There may or may not be.
Okay.
But that would be usually we do those in the last board meeting.
Okay, so this does not need to be adopted by resolution, the way I understand the state code. So we just entertain a motion to accept June 10th as the date for the public hearing for the 2024-25 budget and potentially a budget amendment for the current year.
I'm looking at the resolution 24-01, and it
Yeah, we gotta
includes
set
a
that.
date for the public hearing.
I thought it included it for the 25 budget.
Yeah, Dan, you're right. I don't think we need to take a motion on it then. I think we're good.
It might be best to recommend and amend the motion and actually set the date and time. But I'm going to defer to legal counsel on this stuff. But for the budget, the 2025 budget.
You're good with both of them? Just one.
Any thoughts on that?
all in one or both, it doesn't matter for that purpose. And I think Chris is right. We do want to set the date for the amendment.
It's an amendment, because we adopted it with the tentative budget, but we also need to make sure that there's a budget or a
We're
public
gonna
hearing
set a
for the
hearing.
budget amendment
Budget
for the
amendment.
2024 budget.
Okay,
Is that-
so just as you do it, make sure the language includes both the 2025 budget and potential
The
amendments to
amendments.
2024. And then
Does
we're
the-
good.
Does a budget amendment require a public hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
So Dan, would you accept that motion?
Yeah, I will make the
Amendment.
motion as described, to again approve resolution 24-01, setting the dates for the public hearing, as described in the motion, but then also setting the same date as a potential public hearing for a budget amendment to the 24 fiscal year budget.
I'll second.
Perfect.
Okay, we got a motion and a second by Mayor Lundberg. So since this is a resolution, we're gonna have to do a roll call again, Krista.
Okay, Zach Watson,
Yes.
Nate Rockwood,
Yes.
Brenda Moore,
Yes.
Ann Johnson,
Yes.
Bren Bybee,
Yes.
Grant Hansen,
Yes.
Mayor Lundberg,
Yes.
Jason Sant,
Yes.
and Derek Euler.
Yes, thank you, Krista, and thanks everybody for that discussion. Turn the time over to Roger for consideration of the appointment of general counsel.
So, as you know, we have this amazing individual that works with us here, Nicole Cottle. We're very fortunate to get her initially hired as our Director of Government Affairs. We've since had a vacancy in our general counsel position, and she's was willing to take on those responsibilities. And so that we can't just automatically do that. Our general counsel is a position that you know, to some extent, we all report to the board, but that's a little bit more of a direct relationship to the board for legal reasons. And anyways, this formalizes her as our general counsel. We still have her doing government affairs roles for the organization. It's a lot to put on her, but she's amazing and has been willing to take that additional responsibility. But this action would formalize that to make her our general counsel for the organization. And it being contemplated that the same happens at Utopia as well. So anyways, I don't know what to say about her. She's incredibly capable, has a great background, been doing this sort of stuff for a long time, for obviously West Valley City most recently. Do you have any comments you want to share, Nicole?
No,
Any
I just
questions?
appreciate that. Undo my mute. Sorry, I'll learn to mute. I just appreciate the opportunity very much, and I had such a great and wonderful experience at West Valley that really did train me and give me the both the width and the depth to do a couple of these similar things for 25 years. So I'm so happy to be at Utopia, and my time here almost headed into a year now has been great, and appreciate the opportunity to act as general counsel as well, and happy to answer any questions that you might have as a board.
I'm not sure how I feel about Utopia continue to take our city leadership away, like Jason and Nicole at this point. And so when's it going to stop, Roger, with that? I've worked adjacent to Nicole, not necessarily with Nicole, and I think she's a great addition to the team. I think you're going to be phenomenal. You've done a great work at West Valley. Again, I haven't worked with you directly, Nicole, but I hear many things about you, and you've done great presentations at league conferences and UCMA, and so I think you'll be a great addition for sure. And I'm happy to make the motion right now, Roger and Derek, and I make the motion to approve resolution 24-02 to appoint Nicole Cottle as the general counsel for Utopia.
Thanks, Brand. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dan. Is there any further discussion?
Just that I third that how fantastic Nicole is, and she goes above and beyond. She's an amazing team player. I've had questions for her from league presentations she's had. She's given tons of time. She goes above and beyond. So this will be a great, well-deserved position.
Thank you, Mayor. Krista, this is a roll call as well, if you'll do that for me.
Zach Clarkson,
Yes.
Nate Rockwood,
Yes.
Brenda Moore,
Yes.
Dan Johnson,
Yes.
Bren Bybee,
Yes.
Brent Hansen,
Yes.
Mayor Lundberg,
Yes.
Jason Sant,
Yes.
and Derek Euler.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Nicole. Good luck. I'm excited for you and Utopia for your new assignment. So, let's see, Utopia or UIA update. Your turn again, Jason.
Okay, thanks, Derek. I'll just share my screen. Okay, here is the monthly financial update. And pretty good news here. If you look at where we were last year from this year, our total revenue were 4.4 million. And this is, by the way, this is month end February 28th. So I'm showing the month of February results. I don't have March in here yet. It takes me a little while to close my book, so I didn't have time to do that this time. Total revenue, we're up about $4.4 million. And we are projecting very closely to be where we expected to be for the end of the year. I think these numbers are a little conservative. Residential transport and fiber lease revenue are projected to be over where we have those budgeted, and business revenues projected to be slightly under, but we are well under 1% of the total projection. Also, something that makes me feel good is our budgeted numbers are much higher than what I had shown the bond people. So our revenues for the year are good with that. Expenses, they're looking good. Marketing's looking a little bit high. I will say though, I need to do a reclassification of marketing expense. Some of that belongs to Utopia and it's not UIA related. So I think we will probably come right in on budget there for marketing for the end of the year. And we're close on the other expense numbers that we show there. Capital projects, we are running a little bit ahead on capital projects. I have seen the pace slow down, so we may end the year close to where we budgeted there, but we're still waiting to see. Right now, we're running a little bit like we may be $1 million over on capital projects, but it has slowed down lately, so we'll see. Any questions on the financial update? If not, I'm trying. Let me try to show you. There we go, the financial charts. Sorry, this is looking different than I'm used to. Here's our combined revenue numbers. We do see a slight dip in February. This is related to, sometimes we have big installation charges, sometimes we don't. In January, we had a $60,000 risk. We had a $60,000 installation charge. And in installation charges in February, I only have like 3,000. That's the reason for the small bump. But other revenues are still going up, and the trend still looks really good. And once again, here's the UIA revenue versus bond obligation, and we're at more than $1 million per month now that we're clearing. So that's all really, really good news.
Will you repeat that sentence? You're more than $1 million. So the last word jumbled a little bit.
Yeah, if you look right here, this is in UIA. This is how much the bond payments are versus how much the revenues are monthly. So the top blue line that you see, which is roughly $2.25, $2.3 million, that's the top light blue line for debt. And then if you go up, the gap between that and the revenue line that you see, which is the continuous line, that's at over $3.4 million. So yeah, if you look at just the bond obligation and how much we're paying in bonds, we're over $1 million per month now, and that's we like to see this gap increase, and it's what we need.
Are all of these bond obligations going into the future? Are they all flat like this, or are some of them? Are there some that grow?
They are all fixed rate until they're paid off.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no variable rate bonds. They do not grow. They're fixed payment, fixed rate.
Hey, thank you, Jason. Is there any other questions for Jason? Bran, I'll give you the first lesson that I learned about bonds. Jason come to Brigham City and did a presentation for our council last week. So the original debt pays off in 2040. So that'll be about the time that Roger steals you and has you work for Utopia. So. Okay, thanks, Jason. Roger, your turn for an update on our network.
The network is good. Now I'll go ahead and share some information here though. I'm going to pull up our subscriber report. This is a little bit different than what was in the packet. Since the time we sent that information, we'd have a project going on here to actually improve our reporting. Internally, we use Tableau, which is a really nice tool where you can go in there and manipulate things, and we want to get our reporting into there to make it more friendly for us, but then we could actually make that available to you versus a static document. You can manipulate, like add in a city, remove, change, see a lot more detail and play with our data. In that process, we identified a couple of formula errors in what we had been putting together. They don't create substantial differences, but we're missing some of the newer cities in the calculations. So I think Bountiful and Bozeman were probably missing. Doesn't affect us a lot, but just our subscriber numbers are a little bit better than what was sent out, and we fixed that. But obviously growth's been really strong. I've added this, I changed this to like a 6-month snapshot for take rates. I always hesitate to share take rates because I always feel like they're not accurate because it's the number of services divided by the number of parcels from our GIS data. And often, I saw this really bad when we went and presented at Perry recently because they have so many parcels in that city that don't actually have a structure on them that could receive service. We actually look at a map of buildings and houses and things that could get service. I think it looked more like 75+% that have service. Yet our reporting is, showing 53%, which is still fantastic, but it's missing it on the low side. But at least it gives you a sense of kind of how we're either increasing or decreasing in a city. What we do see though, you'll see some of these cities like Linden where, it looks like it's gone down a little bit over the last 6 months. But if you actually go to Linden's report, it's only because the number of parcels is increasing. Our number of customers has actually been growing pretty well over time. So don't get too concerned. You have the detail here to look and see if their subscriber numbers are continuing to increase in each city. And we have seen, other than a couple blips when maybe somebody converts off in a bulk arrangement where we'll see a large number of connections go away as a one-time event. Other than those one-time events, we're consistently adding customers and growing proportionally in the city. So we're still, it's safe to say we're the number one growing provider in our cities, and often the largest and most popular service. If not, we're probably getting there. So, certainly that's an indicator that these new services we've seen come out, like satellite service or 5G home internet or things like that, are still just not meeting the need or are not competitive with the Utopia offerings. In addition to that, we have some new offerings that are becoming available. So we now have a 2.5 gig tier that we've made available to our service providers. Just an announcement in our product catalog update that we've sent them, and they have 30 days really to when we make those types of changes before they take effect. And so we've already gotten some responses from them of where they would price that service, but we're waiting for a lot of responses still before that starts becoming available on our website and for orders. But that's a tier that we make more money from, and they've asked for that tier because they see it from Comcast, Google, and others have offered a 2 gig or 2.5 gig tier. So we're excited to offer that now. And then we've lowered our cost for the 10 gig tier. And so we'll see an update there as that becomes competitive. We think that we were kind of probably on the threshold of being the most affordable 10 gig residential offer in the country, but it's still kind of high. So even though it was the best tier, 10 gig in the country, it still isn't very popular. Now we'll see that at a price point where we expect a lot more people to be picking that. Not more than gig, but certainly affordable rather than the bragging rights, super power user types who've gotten it in the past. What we've seen a lot is people pick the higher tiers when they get reimbursement from their company. If they have that option, they're like, well, if my company's going to reimburse my internet service, I might as well get the best. Certainly we have the best options available. And so I think we've seen that uptick in our higher tiers, and we'll see it even more so as we have brought those into more consumer-friendly tiers. But anyways, it's exciting that we were able to stay competitive, keep ahead of other options. We continue to see growth and have these changes and tools that should help us be even more competitive. And it's all going really well. And 63,000 customers across all of our systems. That includes like Idaho Falls and Bozeman, those types of partnerships. But it's been a very good year as we've added. I think as we did our year-end update, it was almost 10,000 net growth across all systems, which was an incredible year for us. We've budgeted and forecasted not as aggressive growth this year because we don't have as many cities as Jason mentioned. We had, I think it was 4 cities that were completed last year that grew, just caused huge bumps in subscribers coming onto the system. We're still seeing pretty strong growth in those cities. We forecasted it to be very conservative, but I think we'll probably blow past what we forecasted, and that's a good problem to have. We're trying to strike a right balance of not being too conservative, but also not expecting the type of growth we've had this last year because of the timing of those cities coming on. And the structure is a little different, right? Our biggest city coming on now is Bountiful, and Bountiful is a Utopia partnership. So the revenues and customers for those would show up at Utopia, not at UIA, which is good. As we have revenues at Utopia, it's able to make those dividend payments versus that money coming out of UIA or vice versa. Money coming in at either organization benefits the other. We just kind of make sure things are appropriate and budgeted accordingly. But it does make things complicated when we have, this bucket is Utopia and this one's UIA, and growth, the timing of growth happens differently in the two organizations because of how those partnerships come in. But it's all going really well. We're excited for the next year of growth and these new products and tiers, and have no reason to believe things won't continue to be good. Any questions on the network?
I mean, that sounds great. Roger, is it a 2 or 2.5 tier? I wasn't completely clear.
So we have made it as a 2.5 gigabit tier. The providers can market that as a 2 gig tier if they want to. So I'm not quite sure how they're deciding to do that. Kim, have you gotten feedback from them whether they want to make it 2 gig or 2.5 gig?
All of the ones I've heard back from want it 2.5.
2.5, okay.
Yeah.
And do you know kind of a general timeline that will be marketed?
I'm anticipating that we put in the letter when we send it out May 1st. I think, Roger, there you just referred to that it could go live a little bit earlier, but right now our tentative launch date is May 1st.
Yeah, the way our agreements work is we have to give them 30-day notice for changes, but it's not a bad thing if they put them up on early. And we're like, well, optionally, if you want to take advantage of this now, go ahead. But officially it's May 1st. So yeah, that's an exciting tier. One of the nice things about the 2.5 gig installation is that we're actually installing a 10 gig connection to the homes and businesses that get anything over gig. Some of the other networks out there have equipment and things where it is actually limited to 2.5 gig, and a 10 gig or higher tier would require truck rolls and upgrades of equipment and all of that. But our costs are really the same to do 2.5 gig versus 10 gig. So we're just going straight in with 10 gig, and it's basically a software limit that limits them to the 2.5 gig. But in the day or event that someone decides to go from 2.5 gig to 10 gig, it's just a configuration switch for them. So we are fully 10 gig enabled and even installed with those 2.5 gig customers the day they get it. So we're kind of a little bit ahead on the technology front.
Thank you, Roger. Is there any other questions for Roger? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you, Dan and Brant. All in favor that we adjourn, please say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Thanks, staff. Appreciate your time and questions and comments today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about